Welcome to Rugby Nation episode 3. We've got a great show installed. As always, Iain Payten, editor of Rugby.com.au. I'm filling in for the great Sean Maloney, which some people say I look like him, a shortened version, maybe not. But then Justin Harrison, one of the all-time greats. Justin, welcome back from Hong Kong. How are you feeling? Are you recovered, or did you play, or what were you doing over there?
Yeah, I'd probably say you're like one of those chip packet versions of Maloney you put in the microwave and they shrink. You know, those twisties back in the day? Yeah, right. Just wanted to get that off my chest. I feel great. We've had a great week in Hong Kong. We took away some classics mixed with some Pathway Australian Sevens squads players. We had a very competitive team in the Tens tournament over there. We went around and saw probably about 300 to 400 different expat kids over there. Awesome. Gave them a bit of a feel about what it is to play and train with an ex-Wallaby player. And then finished with enjoying the festival that is the Hong Kong Sevens.
South Stand? Were you in the South Stand? Did
I
you
wasn't
see
in the South Stand.
Caveman Shabal do his...
I did see that. That was
good. Mate,
that is the Manila Vanilli of France, isn't it? That is unbelievable.
How does one think that a marketing idea was like, let's get Sebastian Shabal to sing... And the way he was in the caveman suit, and some of the best pics ever.
The way he was dancing looked like he was getting a slow taser, but it wasn't great.
Have you seen the real video clip version of it? You got it. There's that version at Hong Kong, and there's actually a real proper.
Oh, he sings it, does he?
Yeah, video clip where
he's got different jackets on. Looks like Richie Benner.
Did you bump into Martin Johnson? Because I know a couple of years back you bumped into Martin in the bar, and then you took.
I did. Yeah, I didn't see him again. We're probably good at avoiding each other. Last time I saw him, it was probably not my best encounter with a World Cup winning second rower. Someone suggested that Martin Johnson was in the crowd, so I thought I'd go to the clubhouse, having remembered that there was a photo of me beating him in a line-out on the wall. I took it off the wall and whilst running away from security, took it up to him and said, mate, let's have a photo next to each other. It wasn't difficult to interpret what he said back to me, so I left shortly after.
Let's get straight to the Super Rugby Rebel Yell, right? This year is the Rebels' year, Pato. Why are they playing better? Is it the Quade factor? Is it because Vessels has got his feet underneath the desk? What is it about this Rebels side in 2019?
It's a combination of factors. You know, I mean, partly you have to say it's overdue. 2011 they came in with some talent and you were part of it, obviously. I think you're still getting paid by the Rebels, that's the word.
I'm still a fan.
9 seasons in, they've had a couple of false starts. It's a little bit like the Western Force. They've had a go at playing different styles and then gone away from that. Dave Vessels came in, obviously, last year after the Force exited the comp, brought a bunch of Force guys with him. They just look like they've got, as Goog said in our very first program, they look like they know what they're doing as a team. Sitting in second on the comp, leading the Aussie Conference by 7 points now, doing everything right.
Yeah, and Goog, you're always right. I think there's been 1 or 2 times you've been wrong in my whole time that I've known you, but you called it a couple of weeks ago and said Rebels are the team to beat, and that was after the Waratahs beat the Crusaders, and Waratahs by this week, a tougher run. If the Rebels keep this form going, it's almost like good night, Tars. You're not winning this Australian conference, and they're going to look for a wild card.
Yeah, look, I think the Rebels have been through some trauma with their initial squad design. Was probably too heavy with players that thought they could recreate what the Brumbies had done in Canberra. Then they've clearly benefited from getting the best of the rest when the Force were taken out of the competition. And they have a very astute coach, and they've recruited well. Will Genia and Quade Cooper are playing very, very well together in a team that is playing a very good supporting act to 2 players who want to take the ball to the line. You need a tight forward pack that can supply consistent ball and fast ball at breakdown. So back row, tight forwards, supply of ball, 2 world-class combinations, it all bodes well.
You got guys doing it properly too, you know, like they're trying to play that game at the gain line, and I looked up the stats. They have the best advantage line stats, 72% in the comp. And then you've got Genia and Cooper who lead the comp for try assists, number 1 and 2. So you've got the best in the business in the comp actually doing their jobs.
I actually think they're I won't say this the wrong way, but they're not their sort of X-factor stars. They're playing okay, but it's the Cottrells, the Rangies, the Meeks that are playing the best footy, and that's what you get at Super Rugby. But whether or not those 3 players can take a step up, but we'll talk about Wallaby selection a little later. But this week, Stormers, it's a game that you would think they would win, especially seeing the Stormers last week. They were pretty ordinary. First half of footy there was no points, but they need to keep charging on the Rebels, and you're noticing now the crowds are coming back as well. They're at the Stockade, so huge match for them this weekend.
You got to bank these ones, don't you? You know, like if we're fair dinkum, you look through the history of Super Rugby. If you're planning to win a comp, you got to finish top 2. Forget making finals. Their ambition has to be higher than that. And the way you used to do that was win all your home games, try and pick up 2 or 3 on the road. So you got to win your home games. Stormers are no easy beats by any means. I think that. Luckily, I think that Sia Khaleesi, their skipper, the Springbok skipper, is out this week, so that's a boost for the Rebels. But yeah, no, they've got to get the job done at home.
And Jeff Parling, line out, the best line out in the league, the Rebels, especially in the Australian Conference. Have you had much to do with him? Have you tried to fight him in your time, or pass around a portrait of you schooling him or something?
He's tried to fight me.
Yeah, okay.
I've been reasonably dismissive of that challenge at the time. Look, they're benefiting. Well, look, they're a mature team. You know, Quade Cooper's matured now. He's been outside looking into the stadium and understands what he needs to do now to perform for a team. And I would say that historically, you look through successful Test campaigns leading into World Cup campaigns and also Super Rugby campaigns. It's the most consistent halves combinations that have been part of the winning sides. Marshall Mertens, Griggs Larkham, and it looks like the Rebels are starting to get something that looks pretty similar.
Probably before we move on, the big challenge now is dealing with what we're doing here, which is talking them up. You know, like we're talking them up and talking finals already. There's still a half a comp to go, so that's the challenge now for them.
Like the Waratahs used to do every year.
We'll talk about the other winning Super Rugby team on the weekend of the Aussie teams, the Reds, and tough game to watch, but it got better in the second half. But this Reds side, it's being led by Tate McDermott, right? We've seen all of these Reds players coming in, and it's a new look squad. We get that. They're rebuilding. I think Samu Kerevi's probably been their best all year, but Tate McDermott, is he... Are we talking about him in a Wallaby jersey? Is it possible to see him as a potential bolter, the way he's playing right now?
Well, I think the modern game is built around nines who play out of the base of the ruck. You know, all the good teams around the world have nines who do that. Will Genny is the best in Australia. Jake Gordon and Nick Phipps have been his backups, and Joe Power. But look, I think you have to throw Tate McDermott's name into the mix, whether it's a reality or not. He's provided a spark there for the Reds that they haven't had in a couple of years now. So, one good game doesn't make a World Cup berth, but yeah, he's in the mix, no doubt.
And the one good thing that it has done for the Reds, it's really elevated them off the bottom of the table, and it's all the Brumbies and Sunwolves have now dropped down. But it's that consistency, Goog, that we need to see from the Reds. And I think immaturity, and that's not to say that they're an immature side, they're just not as well-rounded as some of the older teams out there. Consistency is the key for the Reds at the moment, not so much finding that one game that gets them there. It's actually delivering week in, week out in a young environment.
Yeah, look, their age demograph's certainly lower than the other mean ages of the competition, but, one of the great sayings from Eddie Jones was, you've got to be a test player no matter who you're playing against or who you're playing with. So it might be third grade, mate, but you've got to look like a test player. So he spent a bit of time in India, but That's what you've got to see. So from Tate, the challenge now is he standing out like a test player against his opposition, or is he standing out in a team that's not performing particularly well? And they're very two different styles of an analysis there. So, poor player, good player in a poor team stands out. Good player in a poor team against a very good side, still standing out against them. Now you're starting to talk about a test player.
Samu Kerevi, I spoke about him before. I want to talk about him potentially moving on. He is Mr. Queensland at the moment, and I wasn't a fan of him originally as a captain, but the way he's presenting himself to the media and the way that he's sort of leading by example, I think he's the right person for the job. Can we afford to lose him? There's talk about him going to Japan. Can Australian rugby afford to lose a talent like Samu Kerevi?
Australian rugby can. Whether Queensland rugby can is probably a different question. He has been a talisman for them, and I don't think he's had a bad game this year. When the entire team has not played well, he has lifted them and got them through some tough performances. Look, the mail is very strong that he's got a big offer on the table from Japan. Some say it's almost 3 times what he can earn here. You'd love to see him stay. Obviously, Queensland would love to see him stay, and I don't think we've seen his best footy at Test level yet.
No, he hasn't really worked out if he's a 12 or a 13 at Test level.
No, I would imagine that this next 4-year period, I hate talking in World Cup cycles, but we do it, that's just when he's going to come into his own and become, a top-line Wallaby, a consistent Wallaby. We're going to see guys move on. Whether he stays or not, who knows?
Yeah, it's a tough one, but good, the Brums. Tough one for them. They got off to the greatest of starts, and you almost sort of saw them go, well, hang on, we're in the lead here. We shouldn't be that. Then the Crusaders, well, they just went from first gear to second, just cruised in. Are you worried about your Brumbies? Because it's a tough one, because at the moment they find themselves at the bottom of the competition. Their local support and their crowds is dropping off, and they're a team that need to get their village in order to build that spirit of the team. This year a little bit off, and it's going to get hard for them. And is it time now for Dan McKellar to start trialling new things for 2020, or do you sit there and try and make a wild card or finish mid-tier? It's just a real interesting crossroad for them.
Yeah, look, I think Dan McKellar and Peter Hewitt are really trying to change the style of play that they want to see on the field. Brumbies have been through 3 different shifts in style of play. Early was running rugby, ball in hand, very, very loose but structured. There was still structure behind that innovation. Then we went into probably highest kicking game, highest ruck count, highest maul count. Set piece, very set piece oriented, a lot of mauls, a lot of driven mauls, a lot of tries from mauls, and there's a bit of a mix of it now. I think that they're definitely trying to change. Christian Lealifano's running around the field trying to get people to flatten up, get people to stay inside and outside him and give him options at the line. They're just not being very successful at getting that consistent. We saw a real glimmer of it against the Waikato Chiefs, but I suspect they were that bad rather than Brumbies were that good. It was a lot of throw and hope that worked. And then coming up against better defensive sides that are better structured, you'll get 1 or 2 opportunities which you may cross on, like what we saw against the Crusaders, but then that consistency is not going to get them home over an 80-minute period.
I'd like to see him stick at it in that new style.
I think so.
They're playing.
I don't think
the style of footy is pretty entertaining.
Well, you're doing something right if you're leading the Crusaders in Christchurch at halftime. And what was interesting about that was, and we talked about it last week, is that sort of that freedom from expectation when the Sunwolves came in here and had nothing to lose, beat the Waratahs. The Brumbies, no one expected them. When they left 4 Wallabies at home, no one expected them to beat the Crusaders. Probably the Crusaders didn't quietly just expect it either. So they went out there and great performance until halftime. Halftime they went, actually, maybe we can win this.
Which brings me back to that combination and consistency. 7-0 at half-time with 4 Wallabies in the side, you might kick on and not get handed to you. But with 4 Wallabies out of the side, your bench is that much weaker, and we saw that. We saw the deterioration of the form when players started changing. It really fell away in the performance, and it's because we had 4 Wallabies rested. So now we have a province that's coming home with its tail between its legs. Australian rugby now is thinking, geez, we've only got 1 province that's doing well and maybe a few guys at the Queensland Reds. And what have we done? We've rested 4 guys that have probably trained 6 days a week anyway and done an early spin cycle on Friday. So have they rested? You actually train less when you're playing than you do when you're not playing.
The Brumbies discipline, and they've been a side that's always been very disciplined in attack, and they control, and you say they sort of started this multi-phase rugby style that Australian was known for. But 2 yellow cards in the second half, and then you really saw in the back end of the game, their bench was so young. I think Whitelock came on, and the experience of him compared to some of the Brums guys, I just think there's just this next layer that New Zealand have got. We talk about their stars, but a lot of the benches around the New Zealand teams are quite superior. But I think the Brumbies are a very young side. We just keep talking about the Reds being a young team. This Brumbies side is very young when you take their stars out as well. So interesting times ahead. But cutting across to the Waratahs, that was a great game of footy. The Blues and Waratahs. They got off to a slow start. Never won. They haven't won there since 2009. They were always up against it. But I thought, if I'm walking away from that game, I'm feeling okay. I'm back on track with the Tars. But there's a couple of moments in that game which were quite crucial. But could we have won that game if Michael Hooper was playing?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I would say that the Waratahs killed themselves in the first 15 minutes. They were down, 17 blot. that's the frustrating thing about the Waratahs. They look like they can beat absolutely anyone. And the Blues, to be fair, are one of the informed teams of the comp. They're actually playing very, very well. And they made the Blues look, on the back foot at times when they were rolling the Waratahs. But you just can't afford to go out of the gate so slow, and to drop 17 points. It's game over from that point, no matter how well you play afterwards.
And you forget the Blues have won 4 in a row now.
Yeah.
So they're a really good rugby team that could do some damage at the end of the year. But good from my end, 3 minutes to go in a game, and you were a tactical genius. Ball gets kicked down by the Blues. They've just scored in the corner of the Waratahs, and massive fan of Jake Gordon, so this is an attack on Jake. But you've got to hold on to the ball with 2.5 minutes to go. You've got the ball, you've got a bit of momentum, you've caught it 15 metres out, box kick in, and as soon as a Kiwi team gets the ball when they're up by 2 points with 2 or 3 minutes to go, playing that pick and go sort of piston style of footy, you sit there going, why did they give it back? That killed me in the end, because I watched the whole game, and to see the Tars turn it around, bring the spirit back, and they played some unreal footy, and just one moment there, they let it slip.
Kicking's just a turnover in disguise. It's an attacking kick. It wasn't box kick. So box kicks should be banned. If tactically you're going to be serious about it, they just contribute nothing besides an extra 10 minutes for a halfback to stay behind a training and kick the ball. That's about it.
That's right.
Well, the Waratahs, if I'm putting myself in their shoes, the Blues, they rolled out like 3 minutes of, just pick and drive at the end and recycle and then kick it out. It's a struck match where half of them were penalties, to be honest. And Daryl Gibson said after the game, we thought that there should have been a few calls in our favour. So, how many times have we seen that? I remember the Reds lost to the Crusaders on the bell a couple of years ago because they tried to see out a minute and a half just rucking it out, and someone got pinged for over the ball. So maybe that's what they were trying to play for.
You go long and find dirt with a kick, keep it in.
Yeah.
Don't make it contestable. Don't make it in your half again. Straight under the pump. You're fatigued, away from home. Young side trying to find consistency. Everyone's young. It seems young in this group, particularly.
I just think don't kick it. I just think don't kick it. You just got to. You're down by 2. You got 2 minutes to go. You've just got to keep running. And when we play without fear, Australian teams, completely different outfit. It's almost like we need to be down by 17 to kick into gear. But anyway, you were really good at flopping on the breakdown. Just really dominant flops, like just coming there. And I used to love watching you do that.
Did it sound like that too?
A little bit. It sounded like you.
Is that what you can see from the bench?
Yeah. No, I used to flop on top of it.
Watch me.
Anyway, we'll move on. Super W final. I said you were crazy. What did I say last week when you called the Reds?
I think you said they'd put 20 on them.
I said did, but you said they'll win the Reds.
Well, I said they were
Queensland.
a chance.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Did you?
I said you were delusional, right? And I'm sitting there watching this game at Leichhardt Oval. I was in the stands. It was an awesome atmosphere, and being in the crowd watching it, it was just a really good feeling. And I know everyone's going to compare it to other women's sport around the country at the moment, but gee, that competition has got so much potential. And on field, like, they were going ballistic. I reckon there would have been about, if that was a Super Rugby game, probably 2 or 3 yellow cards. They were going so hard. But the Waratahs found a way. But this Red side, and they're 10, like, they're a good rugby team. And I'm just pumped for next year because I just know how much potential this has got.
Well, I covered had the good fortune to cover the grand final last year when Ash Houston kicked the goal in extra time. And that was, no kidding, one of the best games of rugby I'd seen all year. And the quality of this year's final was lower, lots of drop ball, the tension was obvious, but the intensity, like, again, one of the best games I've seen all year. And that's what you get when it's a great advertisement for women's rugby. We've seen a lot of women's rugby growth in Australia, but it's the sevens form. It's sort of the tries, the speed. This is all about intensity and physicality, and it's just great to watch. It was a fantastic final, and the better team won. Just the Queensland defence was enormous.
It was,
but
wasn't it?
You just had that sense that they were going to get through eventually, and Grace Hamilton, who had a great game, scored the match winner.
There's across the board. There's more athletes playing women's rugby. Instead of people that had spare time or women that were kind of interested, there are now athletes playing, and they're tactically well coached. There's better coaching, there's better pathways starting to come through, there's better imagery around all of that. It's safer. And so people are starting more often to play and devote more hours to it. Fastest growing sport in the world is is women's rugby. So
it is the
starting to reflect.
I think what Super W has done for me, it's not shown me that women's rugby is great. It's shown me that rugby is great because it's a game for all shapes and sizes. Very accessible. I was sitting on the hill and I was next to an Irish person. There was a Samoan crowd. Like, it's just that really. It was just an awesome event.
Inclusionary.
Yeah,
Inclusionary
it was great. And I think that next year it'll get better. Ratings are up, crowds are up, the level of the Wallaroos that are coming out of this competition's there. So it's only going to get better. And as we do each week, we have a throwback, and one of my all-time favourite players, Wendell Saylor. And I know you've been spending some time with him this week, but gotta love Big Del.
And Saylor. Lovely running by Saylor, and what a step. He'll get his try here. Big Wendell. Yes.
Well, let me play host for a minute. You two both played with Wendell.
Uberdell.
Favourite Wendell story?
I've got a few. Behind the scenes, there was a couple where I think when I was first in the Wallabies, 2002, we were staying in where did we stay? In Argentina. Iguazu. Were you on that trip?
Iguazu
Falls. And jet lag. I just thought I'd go and lift some weights, and I'll rock into the gym, and there's one big Wendell Saylor, I think it was about 3 a.m, lifting tin. He just had an awesome energy. But I think the best memory from Wendell for mine is when he first put on the Waratahs jersey and played against the Reds. You don't have that anymore. Like that showtime and pointing at the crowd. I know Quade did the sort of ears thing, but it's no coincidence that when rugby was flying, when he was was there in the face of it, you're getting 40,000 at Allianz. Like, he did bring some magic. But I got plenty of memories. But when he was playing for New South Wales, when he came back and it was his first game back at Suncorp, just the way he just sort of brushed it off, and he actually played really well that game. So I got a lot of time for Del. I think he's done a lot for the sport, and I think he's still doing a lot for sport, not just for rugby. He does a lot of great things no one knows about.
Cool.
I was fortunate enough to room with him a lot of times when we toured, and being on this tour, we roomed again. He requested, I don't, but he requested. And I walk into the room, and I'd forgotten, but he likes to turn the air conditioning down to basically a level just below freezing. And so I walked into the South Pole in Hong Kong, and all I could see was his eyes poking out from under the dune. And I said, mate, if you're cold, why don't you turn the air conditioning off? He said, no, baby, I've got to cool down the jet engines. I've got to train this afternoon. So he's lying in this bed talking to himself the whole way. And all during the night, I'm thinking, he's never going to stop talking. Mate, you've got to go to sleep. And now I realised that he actually was asleep, still talking to himself the whole way through the night. So, yeah, Del, yeah, baby, yeah, Del, you're looking good, Del. So, yeah, it's a great experience to go on a tour with him. There's always 2 or 3 of him in the room at the same time, and look, he's just great for Australian rugby as well. From what he wants to achieve with the Classics, gives up his time, puts his hand up all the time, and engages the youth of the next generation very effectively.
And one of the things that you were very good at, Goog, was playing. Did you play actually?
No, that's probably why we performed better on the field this year. No, I didn't.
You have played a couple of games this year, which is a huge achievement at 60. I think that's good to know. Now, Justin, Tim Walsh, great coach, came in early. Now it's these different and new ideas with Stephen Larkham. You spoke to Stephen and Tim over in Hong Kong. Do we be patient, or is what they're trying to do not working, or is there a plan to play?
Well, there's absolutely a plan to play. Walsh is one of the hardest working, knowledgeable coaches I've come across. And Stephen Larkham now is putting his IP into that program, and they're definitely trying to change the style of play. Historically took 8 or 9 rucks to score. They're looking to try and get that model to 2 or 3 rucks, line break, score, much more efficient, which then won't see them as fatigued in the back end of a game when they start dropping off some tackles lately. So there's absolutely a plan in place. They've copped a few injuries. They had a horrible draw in Hong Kong. They've got a much better draw heading in to Singapore, and certainly they'll be buoyed by the prospect that presents.
And if you were to dress up like a caveman and sing before the game, like Sebastian Chabal, could you lift? What song would you do it to?
I'd probably look ridiculous, just like he.
No,
did.
what would you do? Would it be 1,000 Miles? What song would you do it to if you were?
I'd have to be some sort of Freddie Mercury song, I think.
On point?
Yeah.
What sort of Freddie Mercury kit? Are we talking like the white singlet jeans Freddie Mercury, or are we going to go yellow leathers? What are we talking about?
No, I'd like white leather ensemble.
Okay.
But the singlet version where you zip down the front and then there's just the little mushduck
right,
there.
we'll get that sort of
place to finish.
It could be. Good, thank you. I'm glad you came back in one piece. And Payten, as always, keep calling the game as you do. And we'll see you back here next week. Not me, of course, because Sean Maloney's back. He's far funnier than me. But we look forward to bringing you another episode of Rugby Nation. Stay tuned here on Rugby.com.au.